Kevin Harvick, Denny Hamlin, and Clint Bowyer are begging NASCAR to make dramatic changes to the short track rules package. And just how real is the Chase Elliott effect on TV ratings? How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric. Welcome to Out of the Groove. Lots to get to today. Clint Bowyer said the current short track package sucks. Kevin Harvick said he'd consider postponing retirement if NASCAR were to put 1,000 horsepower back in the Cup cars. We'll hear what everyone had to say in just a few moments, but first, this episode is sponsored by the NASCAR Hall of Fame. I was just there last week, paid a visit to the all-new Glory Road. 19 cars on display highlighting the people, the technology, the tracks, and innovation that have shaped NASCAR the past 75 years. I'll have a full video from my trip to the Hall of Fame up very soon, but when you visit the NASCAR Hall of Fame, be sure to try out the realistic iRacing simulators, the Pit Crew Challenge, and the interactive Tracks exhibit, which highlights great tracks across the country. Of course, the most recent inductees into the NASCAR Hall of Fame have special exhibits on display. I had to go pay my respect to the one and only Matt Kenseth. From the legends who established the sport to the new heroes, fighting for a spot in the record books, there's always something new and exciting at the NASCAR Hall of Fame. Book your visit today at NASCARHall.com. I'll put that link down in the description. A must-see, a must-visit for any NASCAR fan. Thank you to the NASCAR Hall of Fame for sponsoring this episode. Before we get to some of the spicy quotes and tweets, want to hit on this. Yesterday, Chase Briscoe had surgery on his broken middle finger. That's right, he raced the past 2 races, finished 5th at Bristol Dirt, 5th at Martinsville, with a broken finger. Chase Briscoe posted this clip to social media yesterday.
It went all good. The surgery went really well. Doctor said that it was pretty easy fix as far as once he got in there. So should be all good. Originally I think they told us we were going to get done and leave the hospital around 11:30 or 12 o'clock. We ended up getting out of there at 9:30 this morning. So it's a new track record when it comes to that, which was good.
Glad to hear that Chase Briscoe is in good spirits. Hopefully full recovery. Sounds like he'll be back in the car at Talladega. No issue. Tough dude racing at a couple physical tracks the past couple weeks with that issue. I mean, Bristol Dirt, you're sawing at the wheel, slipping and sliding. Martinsville, I guess it's on his left hand, so he was shifting with his right. But that's a tough, physically demanding racetrack, so kudos to Chase Briscoe, getting a couple great results the past couple weeks. Glad it sounds like the surgery was a success. If you've spent much time on social media the past week, like I have, I practically live on social media. It's my job. I obsess over social media, so you don't have to. But if you have been on social media, you've probably heard this phrase thrown around: the Chase Elliott effect. What is that in reference to? It's in reference to the TV ratings. The NASCAR Cup Series has seen decreases in year-over-year television viewership for pretty much every race so far this season. But once Chase Elliott went down with that broken leg, the ratings seemed to take an even bigger hit. Ratings were down about 8% year-over-year for the Daytona 500, but the past few weeks ratings have been down 10 to 15% in most instances. Fans have called that second drop in viewership the Chase Elliott effect. When the most popular driver isn't racing, some portion of his fans, not all, not even necessarily many, but some portion of his many legions of fans aren't tuning in. They're not as interested. Their guy's not racing. I get it. But now that Chase Elliott has made his return, he raced at Martinsville this past Sunday afternoon. And if you were on YouTube or watching on TV, you probably saw one of the many Chase Elliott is back TV commercials. NASCAR was trying to promote Elliott's return. They wanted to get some portion of those fans back. They believed in some sort of Chase Elliott effect. The ratings for Martinsville are in, and let's just say they're incomplete. From Adam Stern, FS1 earned a 1.26 rating and 2.218 million viewers for Sunday's NASCAR race at Martinsville, up from last year's comparable race, which was on a Saturday night, and up from last year's season-long FS1 average. It's the first increase for a NASCAR Cup points race this year. Couple of things. First off, overall, this is good news compared to the 10 to 15% decreases we've seen for most of this season. However, it's unclear if there was much of a Chase Elliott effect. Because yes, this race was higher than last year's race. Last year's race was a Saturday night race, and historically Saturday night ratings have fallen behind Sunday afternoon ratings. So this year's race was in a much better time slot. I'm not surprised it got more viewership than last year. If it didn't get more viewership than last year's Saturday night race, we would have a very serious problem. One disheartening stat, though, is that the 2.218 million viewers is still down from 2 weeks ago. Richmond was on a Sunday afternoon, also on FS1. Chase Elliott didn't race in that one, and it got 2.3 million average viewers. So the Chase Elliott effect, how real is it? How big is it? It's inconclusive. Doesn't seem to have provided a huge jump, but also this was just the first race back. Yes, NASCAR tried to promote it the past few days, but give it another week or two, more and more fans who maybe did leave when Chase Elliott was out, they'll start to trickle back, hopefully. I think it's hard to judge after just 1 week. Not a bad TV number, but certainly not as great as I think the Chase Elliott effect believers were hoping for. NASCAR needs to promote its stars, all of its stars, not just Chase Elliott better, I believe that. We could sit here and have a many hours long discussion about perhaps what NASCAR could do better. How does it get more mainstream? How does it reach the new fan? How does it maintain its roots? That is a huge conversation, a huge topic. Not going to get into that here. Just wanted to talk about the ratings and whether or not the Chase Elliott effect played a role. But let me know what you think down in the comment section below. I just realized I forgot to turn on the on-air sign. Oh my gosh, that is embarrassing. I've been out of town for, over a week, so I got to get back in my routine. Things are slipping my mind, but yeah. I know it's really bright as well. It does not look that bright in person. The camera makes it look way brighter. Maybe that's something I can work on in the future. But anyway, it's there. It needs to be lit up. It looks better lit up than not lit up at all. So anyway, let's move on. Let's talk about horsepower. Martinsville this past weekend, I think, left some to be desired. Track position has always been extremely important there, but after Sunday's race, many drivers were not pleased. There were only 3 cautions for incident on Sunday, and one of them was for a wheel falling off. That suggests that the cars were a little too easy to handle, or it was too difficult to make a move on somebody and potentially put yourself in a vulnerable spot. I didn't think the race was terrible. I don't think most people thought the race was terrible, but Martinsville can absolutely be better. Clint Bowyer, Fox Sports, tweeted this yesterday. First step is owning it. Our short track program sucks. Unacceptable. I'm confident they'll find a solution. Ooh, off air Clint Bowyer, not mincing words. Bowyer wasn't the only personality with a platform venting about Martinsville. Denny Hamlin went on his podcast, Actions Detrimental, and said a few things that were not surprising, just Denny Hamlin venting, wanting more horsepower. But then on that note, Hamlin made a couple comments that caught my attention.
Is it worth it to try to get $1 million less engine bill? Are you willing to give up what we're giving up for our on-track product? I just don't think that it's worth it. And by the way, the engine bills have not gone down since we were running 900 horsepower. They're the same. I know I've talked about this before, but I really am pleading with NASCAR, who I guarantee you is listening to this. You got to give us some horsepower back, or RPM or something.
Now, Denny Hamlin is both a veteran driver, he's also a team owner, so I think he knows what he's talking about. He could just be venting there. He doesn't work for Toyota, he doesn't work for Chevy, he doesn't work for Ford. He may not know exactly what engines cost. He may not know exactly if they've saved or if they haven't saved any money the past few years. He has admitted that he'll sometimes embellish things a bit on his podcast, but let's take Denny Hamlin's comments there at face value. There's probably some truth to them, if not full truth to them. When NASCAR first began to dramatically reduce the horsepower, especially when we went down to 550 horsepower at all the intermediates a few years back, the justification was that the OEMs, Chevy, Ford, and Toyota, didn't want to build 900 horsepower engines anymore. It was too expensive. Choking those down to 550 meant the engines were more reliable, they wore out less quickly. It saved the manufacturers money and it saved the teams money. And NASCAR also indicated that new manufacturers, a potential 4th or 5th new manufacturer, would only enter the sport if the horsepower was significantly lower. That was the justification, in a nutshell, a few years ago. A few years have gone by, no new 4th manufacturer has burst onto the scene, and now you have a team owner saying that the OEMs really haven't saved any money by cutting down on horsepower, for whatever reason. If that is all true, then yes, absolutely, NASCAR and its partners should be looking into adding horsepower as soon as possible, because more horsepower will fix the vast majority of the problems, at least on the short tracks and road courses right now. Denny Hamlin made a great point actually on the most recent episode of his podcast, which I'll link down in the description below. Basically, Hamlin said that now that the next gen has made all the cars a lot more equal, you need to find ways to create new variables. If you add horsepower, if you take away grip, you make the cars harder to control, more chances of drivers making a mistake, tire fall off, giving the drivers the option to save tires at the beginning or at the end of a run. Adding horsepower will add those variables into the equation, and more variables means more passing opportunities. Now the question is, can the teams up the horsepower to 800 or 900 once again? Reporter Bob Pockers tweeted this yesterday. Jeff Andrews, president of Hendrick Motorsports, said any changes for 2024 need to be made now because their parts supply chain would need to start production and planning now to increase horsepower. Would need different pieces because currently made to handle 2 races at current horsepower. So if anything were to change for next year, the teams need to know now so they can start ordering, building the pieces necessary to build engines that can withstand that increase in horsepower. In response to that report, Kevin Harvick chimed in and tweeted, 1,000 horsepower spec, order it. Pretty clear, pretty straight to the point. A fan then asked if Harvick would consider postponing his retirement if NASCAR were to put 1,000 horsepower underneath Cup Series cars. And Harvick tweeted, only if they take the mud flaps off. Yeah, well, I mean, Harvick may be joking there. I don't think he's going to postpone his retirement under really any circumstances, but still, that's interesting. You can tell what he wants to see, where Kevin Harvick's vote goes. And honestly, I'm sure the vast majority of drivers in the NASCAR Cup Series would vote for more horsepower. Maybe there are some that wouldn't. Maybe there are some teams out there that wouldn't want to see that, but by and large, I think most drivers would like to see more horsepower, and I think most fans would as well. I think it would improve the racing on the short tracks and the road courses for sure. The intermediates, I don't know. The next gen has actually raced pretty well at the intermediates the past year and a half, so I'm hesitant to make any major tweaks there. But I think there is a good chance that the racing at intermediates improves as well, for sure. It at least would put an added skill into the driver's hands. Tires would spin more, they'd wear faster no matter what compound Goodyear brings, so there would be a skill. Tire conservation, for example, that drivers would once again have to utilize. Drivers are in favor of it. Hendrick Motorsports is saying maybe it would be possible to make that change. Maybe not in time for 2024, but maybe in time for 2025. So how does NASCAR feel about potentially putting more horsepower into these cars?
We're not sitting here saying that we won't make additional moves, additional changes if we need to. We're going to always try to make our racing better.
That was NASCAR VP of Competition Elton Sawyer. So what specific additional moves would NASCAR be willing to make? Would NASCAR consider adding horsepower? Here's what Elton Sawyer said. Quote, it takes a little bit of a runway to get everybody on the same page and do that in the most efficient and economical manner. If there are other options outside the engine, it would be far easier for us to pull that lever. I'm not saying it isn't a good option down the road, but it takes a little longer runway to get there. So not ruling it out, but certainly doesn't sound like it's at the top of NASCAR or the manufacturer's list currently. Elton Sawyer continued, quote, when you look at the architecture of the engine today, when you add horsepower to an engine, will the components that the engine is built with today withstand 200 or 300 more horsepower? We work closely with the engine builders. Is there another lever to pull with tires or aero? The engine is a much bigger topic and it needs a much deeper dive to get that right. It's not as easy as adding 200 horsepower and showing up at the next oval to race. So right there, Sawyer mentions tires or aero. When it comes to aero, I think NASCAR's done almost everything they can. They could take the spoiler off completely, but that spoiler at the short tracks this year is already pretty small. Maybe they could change some things underneath the car still, but aerodynamically, I think they're just about backed against a wall. Tires, that's a different topic. They could work with Goodyear to develop different tires, different compounds, a softer tire that wears better, no doubt. And that, in the grand scheme of things, is probably easier to be done, can be done faster, probably a little cheaper than a complete engine overhaul. But is Goodyear willing to be aggressive? Historically, Goodyear does not want to build a tire that has a higher chance of blowing out or shredding or something spectacular. Goodyear doesn't want to see their product failing on national TV. That's why Goodyear is always really careful when building a tire that wears, because there's a very fine line that they really don't want to cross. I would love to see Goodyear get a little bit more aggressive. There continue to be rumors floating around that grooved tires are something NASCAR and the teams may start testing. That would potentially reduce grip and increase tire wear, which might make the product better, especially at some of these short tracks. But that still sounds like it's at least a ways off. Long story short, I think while adding 200 or 300 horsepower would be awesome, it'd be an easy sell to the fan base. Look how fast, look how much torque, look at the horsepower. In the short term, I'm not sure that's a realistic option. Maybe a couple of years down the line, we see something change. In the short term, if we want to fix the short tracks, tires will probably be where NASCAR and the teams look first. Maybe there's some aero stuff. They can take something else off the car, but again, I feel like they're running out of options there. That's where they're going to look first. And can they eliminate the shifting? I don't exactly know what would go into that, but that also needs to be high on the list. Denny Hamlin talked about this on his podcast as well. You got to get rid of the shifting. You can't be shifting 4 times around Martinsville and expect a great race. You just can't. I'm sure many of you would love to see more horsepower, but what is the most realistic fix NASCAR should consider first? Let me know down in the comment section below. That is going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please leave this episode a like. If you're new to the channel and you love all things NASCAR, be sure to hit that subscribe button. You've made it to the right place. And thank you, as always, to my very generous Patreon supporters for continuing to help this show grow. Lots of exciting videos and announcements coming very, very soon. Also have a special guest joining the show later this week. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again very, very soon. Have a wonderful rest of your day.